Okay, so hello everyone, good evening. So if everyone can see as well as hear me well, just confirm that. Yeah, hello Samad, hi Pavan, and hello Yasmin. Right? So I'll just wait for 2 minutes before we go ahead. I'll just wait for 2 minutes before we go ahead. So that was a very much interesting topic we have. There has been a debate going on also with respect to the data. Yes, people have been talking about the right to privacy. People have been talking about this, all these things. But seriously, today we'll try to understand what is the importance of data. Actually, what is this data, and what are the issues concerned? What are the issues surrounding this? So these are the things we'll be discussing today. Okay, right. So shall we start? Yes. Okay. So we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. But yes. So those people who are watching after the lesson live is done, also you should able to answer. Like you should be able to think the questions whatever I'm asking today, right? So now, for a common man, before we start about the data protection bill and all. So for a common man, what exactly is data? This is an important question that we have to ask to ourselves. For a common man, what is it? What is nothing but data for a common man? What is data for a common man? Yes, the question that we have to answer to ourselves is this: what is data to a common man? So you may have variety of answers for that. You may have variety of answers for that. For example, one among them could be does not. You mean to say, Sonia, they do not care about the data? Is that what you mean? So basically, for a common person, for a common man, that when you talk about data is nothing but the messages. Yes, we could say the contacts. Yes, all these kind of things we actually consider that as a kind of a data. Yes. So now anything. So these days the data has been completely changed. The way you look into data is this. Like you talk about messages, contacts, the chat, you have the images, the videos that we send. So all of these are generally a part of a data. But now, if you look into the broader perspective of this, is really a common man concerned about data is something which we all have to address today. For example, maybe there are certain kind of people who might say that I don't want to give you my Aadhaar number. But let me be very honest, in India, about 85 to 90% of the people don't care about sharing Aadhaar number to others. Isn't it? In India, 85 to 90% of the people don't even care about sharing of Aadhaar number. For example, if I ask you what is your Aadhaar number, out of 100 people, about 85 to 90 people can actually tell this. Isn't it? At least 85 to 90% of the people can say that this is my data. But now, when you talk about this, how are we really concerned about data is something we have to look into. Right? People don't even care about it, like they give you. For example, let's take the people who are in the age group, like let's say the people who are in rural areas or those people who are uneducated, they don't even care about it. But those people who have some great idea that they think that, why do you want my Aadhaar number? They say. So we already have certain kind of a system. For example, in the Western countries like United States of America, we have a system, we call them as social security number. We call it as a social security number. So what happens here? Any kind of a service that you are supposed to get from the government, generally what happens is that they use the social security number, it must be shared with the government. But you know what? If the social security number is leaked out to a person, now there is a scope that this can be misused in any way. So that is a priority that they give, that is a secrecy that they maintain for the social security number. There are certain instances where they don't even share the social security number with even with their family too. So that is the priority, that is the secrecy that they maintain for the social security number. But in India, if someone asks you what is your address proof, we generally what we do, so we just don't say what is our address proof, but rather we make a Xerox copy of Aadhaar card and give it, this is my address proof. Isn't it? This is the common problem we have. So the implementation of Aadhaar itself was not proper. Though Aadhaar is something which can bring a greater good, but the implementation was not appropriate. This is what we had discussed a lot of times. So it's not that Aadhaar itself is only data. There are many such kind of instances of the data. As I said you, like recently there was some spyware attack of Pegasus. So this is a spyware. So what it do? It keeps track of what the person is doing. So what sort of data we have. All such kind of things will be looked up by the concerned spyware. But what is the progress that the government has been doing here? In this case of Pegasus, or if it's Pegasus, or what is the case with respect to data. So in India till now, we do not have any kind of a law which talks specifically about the protection of the data of the people. And why that data is very important. Let me tell you an example now. So let's take this example now. See, for example, today I would like to buy some shoes. Shoes of some company like, let's say Adidas. So what happens? I do search about this in Amazon or some other shopping e-commerce website. And what I do, then I close this. And when I browse the internet, I keep getting the advertisements of this. So that's the importance of data. So what the data can do, your own data, it is just your interest. So this could bring a crores of profits to the companies. That's the importance of data. But what happened in India is this, that we do not have a proper protection laws. So the government is now focusing on the data protection bill, so which was recently approved by the Union Cabinet. And I'll tell you one case study which happened in the state of Andhra Pradesh. So recently in 2019, we all have seen the general elections, right? So there was a case in Andhra Pradesh which stated that there were some allegations. I'm not saying that this is proven or something, but there were allegations. So one of the good aspect of the good governance, one of the very important aspect of the good governance is this, the feedback mechanism. So there have been allegations that the state government of Andhra Pradesh prior to 2019, the old government, they have done a good job actually. What they have done is, when the people are availing certain kind of a service from the government, so there used to be a feedback mechanism that used to be there. So what people used to do, so they generally give you some kind of feedback about the service they have availed, right? So now just imagine a case. See, if I have availed a service and I got some automated call asking me for the feedback, and I'm not at all happy with respect to the service. So what is the feedback that I'll give? I'll give a poor feedback, definitely, isn't it? I'll give a poor feedback. So now, if this person gets different kind of services and in all the cases he gives the poor feedback, can we say that this person will vote for the party which is in power at that time? Will he do it? Guys, will that person do this voting? Vote to the concerned party which is in power now, where he is not satisfied? So obviously not. Yes, obviously not. And for the social welfare schemes, we are linking it to Aadhaar. So there have been allegations that the government that we have at that particular time have given this particular data of Aadhaar along with the feedbacks to a private company, where they tried removing the votes of these particular people. There have been allegations. And I'm saying that It is not that I'm specifically focusing on the government or the action that is being done, but if you can understand, I'm focusing on the importance of the data here. The data has such a kind of importance which it can actually change the government too. That is the impact of this. So this is the important aspect, the data. So that's why there have been many movies also which keeps on saying data is the new oil. Data is the new oil. For example, like we have some options called cookies and something in browsing websites. So when you actually do, so what happens, according to your interest, they give you the suggestions. So in one or other way they do it. For example, yes, majority of you must be using an application called Truecaller, for example. Truecaller. So the biggest thing that majority of the people will do a mistake is this. Firstly, when you're installing an application in your mobile phone, what it asks is this, ask for the permissions. They ask yes, no. Yes, this kind of permissions would be asked. For example, when you're using the application called Truecaller also, they actually do this. And if you observe this, it says that we want access to your contacts. And you say yes. We want access to your SMS. And you say yes. We want access to your location. And you say yes. Yes, people are not concerned. People don't know what is happening. And by in case, if you say no, they will show you a pop-up stating that app cannot be installed. Isn't it? So this is a common thing that we have in majority of the applications. You just have to do, if you want to use the application, you just have to do what you actually are supposed to do. And if you say no, then you cannot install the app. This is the problem we have. If you look into this, these people are getting into your mobile, knowing your information, taking your contacts. Like how are you able to search a number, like you are getting the name? How is that happening? Because the name has been saved in that way in majority of the mobile phones, and that's how you are getting this. So you must get understanding about this particular data. You must actually, by now you must have understood the importance of this data here. Right? So data is that important. People are not very much concerned about the data, but this data protection is very important. So let's look into this particular bill. So everyone, by now you must have understood the importance of the data, right? So having understood the importance of a data, now we'll move on to the data protection bill. What are the provisions we have and what are the issues that are surrounding again about this particular bill? Shall we move on? Right. So before we start, guys, I have taken the reference of this particular article is from the Indian Express newspaper, which has been published few days ago. So that's one of the major reference which I have done. And apart from this, the explanation will be doing much more than the content that is present over here. So now, recently, the fact is this, that Union Cabinet has approved the Personal Data Protection Bill 2019. If you remember, prior to that, government has already appointed a committee called Justice Sri Krishna Committee, which is supposed to look into this particular data protection law for the country. And they have given some kind of a draft also. So government has made certain changes to that, and now they are coming up with a bill. So as you already have identified that when I ask you what is the data for you, you said it's your messages, any post that you do, or online transactions, searches that you do, all of these is a data. But for a general computer, anything which can be read by the computer in a 0110 format, we call that as a data only. Right? For a computer, that would be the thing. So for an individual, this is the thing. And we will identify some terminologies which are important. For example, if there is a person called A, and if the data of this particular person is being stored and processed, okay, so this person A is called as data principal. This person A is called as data principal. The persons whose data is being stored and also it is being processed, we call that as data principal. So that is a very important provision we have. So this data, whatever you are getting, whatever you are collecting here, this could be definitely a great boon for majority of the companies where they can get lot of profits and all. And moreover, there is a choice that your privacy would be gone. Isn't it? when you give all of these access to the people, ultimately what is going to happen? Your privacy is gone. And many companies, governments, political parties, everyone can get access to that, and you would be able to use this. So one thing we can say it very clearly, that data, whatever it is present, the amount that you are going to get, the revenue that you're going to get from the data is too high. It's too high. So there is a need of regulation of this particular data and the data flow. And what are we going to do here is this: we are going to bring some issues of national sovereignty too. So which would lead to some other concept called data localization too. Right? So now basically, who handles the data is the first point that we have to understand. Who handles the data is the first point that we have to understand. Right? So now, when I do some kind of e-commerce shopping and something, so does it mean that only they would be having this data? So generally, data is stored in some data centers. The known fact is this for all of us. Now, when the data is stored, so this would be stored in the form of a cabinet of documents basically. And you know what? How much data is present in the world? The data that could be present in the world is this. Without any kind of a disturbance of borders of the countries, if you see how much of data is present, that can go as deep as that of Mount Everest, and 4 times bigger than that of the Indian Ocean. So it is just to let you understand how much of amount of data do we have. So the depth would be up to Mount Everest of depth and 4 times that of Indian Ocean. That is amount of data. Now, can you use such a huge data? Again, no. Because the data, it has to be organized properly. If you have such a huge number of data, this needs to be processed. So this part would be done by the computers, which would be taken up. And here, if you remember, I said you already one word called data principal. So it is nothing but the user whose data is there. Here comes a second word I'm highlighting called data fiduciary. So who is a data fiduciary? So the data which is being collected and handled. So that particular handler which is being collecting and handling the data, we call them as data fiduciaries. The second keyword you have to remember. So earlier I said you about the first keyword here, that is data principal, and the second keyword here is data fiduciary. And now, yeah, fiduciary, that's right, Sumit. So now, here, can we say for sure that only these fiduciaries will actually control the data and how this is going on? No, again, that's a problem. Because when the fiduciaries are actually doing it, they may give it to a third party also. That could be a data processor. So now, here what is happening? The data is not just restricted to one particular company, but it is moving from one company to other company. And during this transfer, anything might happen. For example, every one of you must have heard about or read about a study, like a case called Cambridge Analytica. Yes, Cambridge Analytica, which is a very well-known thing, I guess, if I'm not wrong. Like every one of you must have already heard about it, right? So that is also the case which is happening in this case. Like the Facebook, which is actually a data controller, it has actually came into the controversy of this data processor. The data processor was Cambridge Analytica. So this was the case happened. Now, so that's one part of the story. Now we'll talk about the second part. If I ask you what are the important attributes of the data, so the data attributes would be: where are you storing the data, where are you sending the data, and how are you converting it to something useful. So all of these are called as data flows. The flowing of data, right? How is this happening? We call them as a flow of data. And now, here comes a new kind of arguments about the data localization now. Yes, for example, data might belong to certain kind of people, but the ultimate idea that we have to discuss is this: who should have access to that particular data, who should get profit from that data, who will tax the data, and who own the data. These are the 4 things again we have. So, if you're getting my point, these are the concerns that we have towards the data. So, when you talk about this particular case, in the current world, in the globalized world, there are many people who are even arguing that it is not a concern specifically. It is not a concern specifically to talk about the physical location of a data. We are not concerned, like, whatever it happens, that data can be anywhere. This is what the people have been stating. But how is this bill regulating this data transfer? So the biggest ever thing that we have to discuss is this. So the bill has actually divided the data into different types. So firstly, they have considered the data into personal data. The personal data is that where the individual's data, personal data, for example, like, it could be a person's financial data, it could be its health data, it could be a person's sexual orientation, the biometric data, the genetical data, the transgender status, caste, religious belief, and such kind of. So everything related to a person, we call them as a personal data, number one. And within that also, we have a critical personal data according to the government, which is very, very critical, like national security data or military data. We call them as a critical personal data. And now, earlier, the draft which has been given by the Sri Krishna committee has stated that all the fiduciaries. Now, can anyone tell me who is a fiduciary? I said you in the beginning. Can someone tell me who is a fiduciary now? Who is a fiduciary? I said you. Yes, who collects the data and maintains the data. That's right. So now, earlier, the data, like the draft has stated very clearly that the fiduciaries have to store a copy of all the personal data in India. This is what they called a concept of mirroring. So this is the thing which we call actually a concept called as mirroring, where they say that the personal data of the people has to be stored. That too, a copy. They did not say that you can actually do this thing, but they specifically said very clearly that a copy of this data has to be saved in India. That too of personal data. So definitely, will the foreign companies be happy with respect to this draft thing? Obviously not. So this was criticized by many technological companies basically, and even some domestic startup companies also suffered because of this may bring some kind of foreign companies might give some kind of backlash to the local companies and all. So they were very much concerned about it. But now the bill which has been approved by the cabinet stated very clearly that we are removing the stipulation stating that a copy of our personal data has to be stored. Whatever the provision we have, we are removing that particular thing. That's the first point. And what did they say now? If you are removing it, then they say that if you are actually if you want to store the data, then you must take the consent of the individual for the data transfer abroad. And again, here comes a problem. You know what the e-commerce companies are going to do here, right? The e-commerce companies, they specifically don't say, they are not going to say, we are going to, will they take the consent from every individual? Do you think that is going to happen? Do you think that is going to happen? That they will take consent from every individual? Is that possible? Right? Not possible. So what they will do? Then they will just put up a notice stating that, dear customer, in order to serve you better, we are storing your data in so and so country. They just update it. They are not going to take it. To be honest, this is not going to happen. That's right. They put it in the terms and conditions. So this is the problem we have. And earlier, the draft stated that some sensitive personal data that must be stored within India only. And now, if you want to store that, if you want to process that in other countries, that can be done only after the approval of a data protection agency. And now it also says the final category of critical personal data must be stored and processed in India. Okay, so they have taken this into three different kind of things. The first thing they have taken it is a personal data. Then they have taken this into in this case of sensitive personal data, and they have taken into critical personal data. This is how they actually have brought three different kind of things. Okay, you want me to repeat it? Fine. So what happens here, if they want to process the data, so now they are supposed to do that only after the approval of the data protection agency. But that is only with the case of only with the case of sensitive personal data. But if that is critical personal data like national security related issues, that must be processed within India. So the first two categories, they are okay with other countries, but the third category, that must be done within the country itself. This is the other provision it has. And now the bill also says very clearly that fiduciaries, whatever they are present, they must give the government any non-personal data when demanded. See, again, I have given a clarity with respect to that, Samad. The first thing is about the personal data that has to be the consent of an individual is required for the personal data. Second thing is this sensitive personal data that can be processed in other countries too. But here they specifically say that only after the approval of the data protection agency. But the third one, that is the critical personal data, that must be processed within India. So other two things, it's okay, but the third thing, it must India. Okay, right, Samanth? Now I hope that's clear. Right. So now, moving on to this, they say that whenever a government asks any non-personal data to the fiduciary, they must give it. This is what they say. And what do you mean by the non-personal data here? So the non-personal data means any kind of anonymous data. That is, we will not specifically focus on the individual, but rather, for example, if I say, if you are living in some particular area in Delhi, so how many people in Delhi at this time are accessing Facebook, and how many of them are seeing this video? So what is the traffic of that? The traffic pattern, they can give it. So the demographic data, that can be done. So that is when the government demands. If they say it is demanded, so it's not a kind of a request, but it's a demand from the side of a government. Then earlier this draft did not talk about something like this, because most of them are getting the business models from this. According to the location wise, they actually come across with advertisements. And this bill makes very clear that the social media companies which are having which are actually the data fiduciaries, based on the factors such as volume and sensitivity of data, they have to develop their own user verification mechanism. So one of the biggest problem for now there's every data that is talking about, so anything that is about the data we are talking about, everything would be applicable. But as far as my consideration of Idea and Vodafone, they are actually storing the data within India only. So earlier they used to do when Vodafone was the main key player, so that used to be done earlier, but not anymore. So in this case, now what happens in social media these days is this: many fake profiles are actually being shown in the social media and all. So now they say that it should be the responsibility of the social media companies to actually do their own user verification mechanism. They have to do their own user verification mechanism. And now the process can be voluntary for the users, but it must be completely designed by the company so that anonymity of the users has to be prevented. Because on the social media you find different kind of accounts, and what they do, they troll the people like anything. They troll the people. It could be a minister, it could be a woman, it could be a man, it could be a kid, whoever it is. In the name of a social media, by creating the fake profiles, they actually do this trolling, and they say that social media companies have to be active here. And now, so this says very clearly, now exemptions for processing the data without individual's consent. So there are some areas without individual consent also the data can be processed. There are some reasonable purposes for that. For example, like security of the state, detection of any unlawful activity or fraud, in the case of whistleblowing, medical emergencies, credit scoring, operation of search engines, and processing of publicly available data. In all these cases, they say that they could be given some kind of exemption here. And now, as I said you, that data protection agency is already there. So they actually looks into any kind of audits and assessments of this. And each company is supposed to appoint an officer called data protection officer, who should be reporting to the data protection agency. So any kind of complaints and all of these has to be dealt by them. So will the user be informed about sharing? Sharing in the sense, sharing the data with the government. Is that what you mean? Sumit, you can be a bit clear about your question, by the way. So what sort of sharing you're talking about? Will the user be informed about sharing? So in the case of sharing of the data with the government, they did not specifically mention here that the personal data is shared. For your kind information, it says very clearly that non-personal information would be shared, right? So here there is no question of information be shared to the user. If you can see the point very clearly, it says non-personal data only will be shared with the government, and if they want to do this through the through the legal process, they are supposed to do it. Okay. Moving further, now earlier the committee has brought several keywords like purpose limitation, collection limitation, so that they actually will limit the collection of a data about how that is happening and all. But it also has given the individuals the right to data portability and the ability to access and transfer one's own data. All of these were there in the draft committee's recommendations. But now non-personal data examples, as I said you Sukriti, you have joined late, but however non-personal data includes, for example, in certain kind of area, let's say old Rajendra Nagar. So how many people are accessing unacademy.com at this particular time? Let's say 4 p.m. 4 to 5 p.m. how many people have access? So this is a non-personal data. We are not taking a personal information. That's a demographic data. That's a non-personal data. This would be the thing. Okay. Now here it gives some kind of a power, that right to be forgotten. The bill says right to be forgotten. So what it says, now if an individual want to remove the consent that they have given for the data collection and disclosure, this will remove that. So that means if I don't want my data be shared with anyone else, I can get it done. So this is a very important provision that we have, very important provision in the bill. Then when you talk about the other particular aspects of the bill, one of the very important aspects we have is this about the data localization. Yes, data localization, a very important concept. See, in India, there have been many crimes that are being committed. First say that there is a person called Mr. X. So the person called Mr. X. This person has done some kind of a crime in India. Let it be money laundering. Let it be this person has done some money laundering. But how did he do it? The money laundering, he has used some site. For example, an e-commerce site has been used. Any e-commerce site. Let's say the e-commerce site is A. So this person has used a site called A, especially to actually do the money laundering activities. So now, if you want to gather the information about what sort of transaction that this person has done on the site called A, so what is it possible for us to get it so easily? No, because the data is not stored in India. So now what happens here? The data of an Indian, the crime happened in India, the losers are Indians, the victims are Indians, and all of this data, if Indian courts want to look into, if Indian investigation agencies want to look into the data, we are not able to get it. Then how are you able to get it in the current method? You are supposed to use the mutual legal assistance treaty that you have signed with the country to get the data. Is it not a cumbersome process, guys? Is it not delaying the inquiry, investigation thing and all? So the data is of Indians, the victims are Indians, the Indian courts and judiciary, Indian police needs the information. Everything has happened in India and the loss is to India. And if you want the information which is of India, you have to use a mutual legal assistance treaty. Is it not delaying the process? Yes, right? It is delaying the process. So that's why this thing has to be gone. That's the many people have been stating that we need a data localization. That means the data of Indians has to be stored within India itself. Now, for example, there was some kind of a revelation that was made earlier by Snowden, Mr. Edward Snowden. You must have heard this person name. Yes. So what happens? This person, Mr. Edward Snowden, has leaked lot of revelations about US spying on different countries. So when the data of Indians is stored in the United States of America, there is a probability that this information can be misused by the concerned government too. There's a probability. I'm saying I'm not sure that they are doing it, but there is a probability that that must have happened, isn't it? There's definitely a probability of it. So looking into all these particular cons we have, people have been demanding for the data localization. So earlier, earlier with respect to the Pegasus, and Pegasus issue has happened, and before that also, and we know very well, whenever the government reach to the WhatsApp, it is not just about Indian government. Any government in the world, if they reach out to WhatsApp asking for certain kind of information, you know what WhatsApp do? They say, sorry, we do end-to-end encryption in our actually messages and all, so we cannot provide you the data which is being shared between the sender and receiver only, not even us. But now, so across the world, different governments have been criticizing WhatsApp for the way they are actually doing this. And now, the Indian companies will definitely support the localization, isn't it? So let's finish this and then we'll talk about it. Okay. So now this is what they have been doing. And now, for example, Paytm. So Paytm has been supporting the localization. They say without mirroring. That means we don't want a copy, but we want original data be stored in India. And a company like Reliance Jio is also stating this, because they are bringing the examples of China and Russia models. So when you want to do the data protection and all, and the data itself is not stored in India, what is the benefit that you're going to get? So the companies have been arguing that data localization must be done, which is actually the model being planned in the countries like China and Russia. And now many people say that this would also bring a kind of advantage to the economy too. But here comes, yes, definitely it has to be there. So there are certain groups which are actually against the bill also. And what they say? They say we have to think open-minded in the globalized world and all. So they say, what if government is surveillance? If government is doing some surveillance on the data of the citizens, they talk about this now. Do you really think that this is a statement that is to be made? They say that the provisions in the bill are allowing the government to actually do the surveillance on their citizens. Then I would like to say to those particular people who says that with their open mind, the point that we also have to understand here is that very clear, that when the government is specifically focusing on this area, when your data is stored in other country, who is giving you an assurance that that government is not doing this? Isn't it? Who is giving you an assurance that that government is not doing any such kind of things? Got the point? So that's a very important aspect we have. We have to look into this also. Right? It's nothing wrong basically having the data be stored, and the lawyers have also been stating that we are not going to achieve some kind of things from them too. Now, even if the data is stored in the country, the encryption keys may still be out of the national agencies. That means the other countries, where the data centers are there, they have to do it. So technology companies like Facebook, Google and all, so definitely they will not be happy. They are concerned with respect to something called a fractured internet. So that means the governments are going to come into this in between, and the process earlier which was very smooth, that is going to be impacting, and the regulations would be made and all. So this would be the thing, and they say that India is looking towards a protectionism measure also. And many sentiments are there which talk about the you are talking about globalization, great marketplace and all. So this is what is happening. But anyways, the opponent says that this kind of protectionism may backfire India's own young startups, because in the globalized world, Indian startups also wants to improve their scope and all. So they also need to go and reach other countries. And if you say data localization, that would show some impact on them. So this is the problem we have. So yes, but then also they have to share our data, otherwise we charge them. Right. So you must have seen this in the news. Basically, France has imposed the digital services tax, which is popularly dubbed as GAFA tax. And after France has done this, now United States of America is ready to impose tariffs on them. So this is the thing happens. This is the thing happens, and even if you look into the data localization and all, this would be definitely the future also with respect to this case. Anyways, so this is the interesting discussion that we have made on the data protection bill, and if you have any queries, so the thing is, Samarth, we cannot say it for granted that whatever the provisions the committee has given just a draft, and it's up to the government which is to be accepted and not, and we cannot just say. And now, as you say about the retrospective, yes, it has to be retrospective, I feel too, because the data has already been stored there. So now that would cost a lot for the companies also to do this. However, if that is not retrospective, at least from now on we can actually make the changes. This is what the government must be thinking. So that's all for now. So anyone has any queries, you can raise your questions. I'll be here for the next 2 to 3 minutes. So if not, we'll be ending the session. Yes. So anyone, any queries? So any doubts in this? I hope that the concept is very clear. So we will get to know more provisions in particular once the bill has been introduced in the parliament. Most probably we are expecting that. Also movie named Snowden. Yes, that's right. That's right. So question, I'll not be giving a question today. That would be given in the special classes. So you have a class at 7 p.m. on the special class on Unacademy platform too. But is the bill retrospective or not? Government should clear. That's right. It is something which needs to be done from the government side. And some of the important point is this: we still did not get the exact provisions of the bill. This is just the kind of a provisions which are present in some parts of the bill. But you will get to know more about the bill when the bill is introduced in the parliament, right? So, anyways, yeah. So it's a great session, guys. Thank you so much for your thank you so much for your kind cooperation here, and thanks for being here and coming and joining the session. So any doubts, you can always reach out, as you know. And guys, do check out the Unacademy Plus. Many such interesting courses are being taken up by me and many top educators. And you can see on the bottom, you can see in the scrolling basically about my referral code and all. So do check it out and enroll and subscribe for Unacademy Plus. Thank you so much. See you all in the next session. So I'll be updating anything if there is in the Telegram group. So have a great day. Bye bye.